Welcome to Fun and Fundraising, everybody, the podcast where we talk with people behind the top nonprofit galas and signature fundraising events to showcase how they positively transform their communities. I am your host, Rob Giardinelli, and today I am so excited to continue my conversation with the one and only Lance Avery Morgan of Curated Texan. And as a reminder, Lance has an insight of the Texas nonprofit scene in a way that nobody else does. He has been chronicling top galas for 2 decades now, celebrating his 20th anniversary as a luxury media superstar. So Lance, welcome back, and I am so glad to have you here.
Hey, Rob, thanks. It's great to be back with you.
Absolutely. So, in honor of your 20 years, let's talk a little bit about the Texas social scene over the last 20 years. And what is something that has just been a constant in the Texas social scene for the last 2 decades?
I think that the Texas social scene has really, really grown and prospered to heights that I don't think anyone could have predicted. Not too long ago, raising $1 million in one night at a fundraising gala was big news. Now you have entities that are raising 11 or more million in one night. So the growth of the state, the trajectory of the fundraising, and the largesse of the people seems to be at a record high. It's really pretty exciting to be a part of.
So really the constant is that people keep giving, and people keep giving in record numbers year after year after year.
That's right. It's tough to beat the largesse of Texans and Texans. It really is.
Absolutely. So with so many, and there were so many. I think what was so interesting about this spring was just everything finally seemed to be back. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about some of your, some things that you noticed, in terms of theming and, fashion and things like that, and some favorite moments at specific galas from the first half of 2023.
So many galas, so little time. It truly was I call this the bounce back spring. Where really everyone got their groove on after the pandemic. It's like the pandemic never happened, even though people gave big during the pandemic. So people were they were excited to gather again. And so you could feel that energy. It was almost palpable in every ballroom from Dallas to Houston to San Antonio to Austin and beyond.
Absolutely. So, talk about a little bit about, what were some moments at galas that you attended this spring that really wowed you and really dazzled you?
Well, they all did, or I wouldn't have been there, quite frankly. I really believe in these causes, or I'm not going to attend. I'm not going to spend time traveling there. I'm not going to spend time at the gala unless I really believe in it. So I think I have many, many favorites, but some of my favorites are the ones that are actually statewide. So the Texas Medal of Arts Awards, the Bullock State History Museum event. Those are really, really great. The Blanton Museum of Art Gala. These are all really phenomenal events, and many of them are biennial. So, for instance, the Bullock State History Museum Gala that honors legendary Texans this year is Admiral McCraven as well as Roger Staubach. The Texas Medal of Arts Awards honored lots of great people, notable Texans who are doing big things in the world, both culturally, artistically, and musically. So it's just been great to support them and media sponsor them and to actually attend them.
Absolutely. And, those events, I'm glad we're kind of starting with statewide events, because one of the good things about that is that statewide events, and we talked about this with the McConaughey Gala in the previous episode, is it brings people from multiple markets, and it just brings a heightened energy to a space, just because you're going to run into some familiar faces and you're always going to run into some unexpected faces. And it's one of those where, especially if you've gone before, you're going to know people and not know people. And that to me is always the ingredient of really having a good time at an event.
I agree. I love running into people that I know from across the state at different galas. And a lot of people ask me, so when did you move back to Austin? Or when I'm in Dallas, how are things going living here in Dallas? Well, I live in Austin, but I'm at these different events, and people, think, gosh, if he's at my event in another city, he must live here. But in the great good fortune that I have to chronicle them and to help celebrate and elevate these events, I get to see people from across the state. And I got to tell you, every state's every city's resident is very, very different than another city. So a Dallas gala is very different than a San Antonio gala, which is very different than a Fort Worth gala, which is very different than a Houston or Austin gala. So yeah, I always like to be kept guessing, and I always am across this state.
Well, one thing, I'm glad we started with the statewide galas, and we'll talk a little bit about, because there were some really great moments at both of those. One thing about the Texas Medal of Arts Awards that's really interesting and really great is that they honor, anywhere from 10 to 12 people who have had substantial contributions to the arts, not just in Texas, but far beyond Texas, whether it's nationally or globally or whatever it may be. Yeah. And, there's a lot to manage. And, the Texas Medal of Arts Awards has always been a program. And anyone who has watched an award show knows this. Award shows run long. And what was so amazing about the Texas Medal of Arts Awards this year was you had a fashion show done by Leela Rose. You had Taylor Sheridan from Yellowstone. You had readings of poetry. You had performances by Miranda Lambert. Miranda Lambert also did the Marfa tapes with Jack Ingram that she did during the pandemic. And you also had Christopher Cross singing. And it ran on time. And, that is really to be able to pack that much into a program to where every single minute felt purposeful. There was no filler. And you were entertained the whole time. I mean, really hats off to Heidi Marquez Smith and the Texas Medal of Arts team, because they really did a splendid job. And it really is kind of a new gold standard in running an efficient, informative, detailed, entertaining program.
Any successful event, and that's a great example of it, is based on really strong preparation before. That's all there is to it. It was really fine-tuned. All of these events are fine-tuned. You have really high level people who are attending and supporting, and they expect the best, and they get it at these galas.
Absolutely. And, the other event that I want to talk about is, and, it was one of those wow moments. It was really like, this is how you're supposed to feel when you enter an event. When we went to the Bullock Museum Gala in early March in honor of the Texas Independence Day dinner that was chaired by Lisa Cooley of Dallas. Again, it was an event in Austin, chaired by somebody from another market, and all that energy, from Dallas and other cities throughout Texas created a magical night. I know you were there too. Did you want to highlight, what did people get to see when they first walked into the space?
Well, when you walk in, it's a very grand space. And I've been there for many things, from weddings to galas to consulate events. So each event has a different feel. So the good thing is that you have a vast space. The not so good thing is that you have a vast space that you have to fill and make and personalize it to the event. So when you walked into the Bullock State History Museum Gala, the two honorees were Roger Staubach and Admiral McCraven. And they were represented with live statues, really live art on these platforms. And so that was created from a local resource, Live Entertainment, out of Austin. And it was the imagery of Roger Staubach and Admiral McCraven spray painted in gold, including their face, their arms, their uniform, all of them from head to toe. And they were really, really, really still until they moved. And so most people, including myself, I didn't realize they were statues. I thought, oh, that's a really cool installation. And gosh, they must have had a real budget to create statuary, components that represent the honorees. But no, it was actually these two young gentlemen in good shape wearing, Roger Staubach's football uniform and Admiral McCraven's combat uniform. So it was really, really impactful.
It was. And what's fun about the Bullock Museum is that they really know how to maximize use of the space. So, the gala is on the first floor and the main program's on the first floor. And, the gala is on the mezzanine, or the cocktail party's on the mezzanine level on the second floor. And the thing is that, every once in a while I would look down into the rotunda, because you could see people coming in, and more than one person, like, you could kind of see their head as they were walking by it. They were their eyes were still kind of gazed on it as they turned their necks and looked backward, because they were trying to figure out if it was an installation or if it was real. And it was really
Mhm.
kind of fun and cool to watch. And it really brought, you knew from the second you walked in, this was going to be a fun night. And that really, to me, it was probably one of the best entrances I've gone to at a gala in many years, because it really just made a statement the second you walked in.
I agree. And I think that every gala wants to make a statement like that. In fact, every gala you go to, there is something different or substantial about them. And I think that keeps the attendee guessing. So, for instance, the Make-A-Wish Gala that happened, it was for Make-A-Wish of Central and South Texas. They had two galas within a year's time. So that was innovative, that they were able to create that and create that really elevated level of fundraising. And then you have, for instance, around Derby Day in May, that kind of capped off a lot of the social season for the spring. You had three major Derby themes, galas or events across the state. You had Bo's Place in Houston, which was at the Houston Polo Club, which was great because you had polo in the background. You had, you had the monitors for watching the Derby, and then you had what I call the spectator sport of watching people. You had the Elizabeth Ann Seton Board Gala, Derby Gala in Austin. And then you had the Center for Child Protection Gala, Derby themed, at a private estate. So there's something for everyone in Texas. And that's what I love. I think that people love to be dazzled, and people love to create that dazzling facet if they're in the gala planning world.
Those were all really interesting events that you brought up. One thing that I do want to bring up is, especially starting with Make-A-Wish it kind of ties into, and I know you and I were talking off camera about, or off air about this, but just how happy the fashion was this year.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of that was because 2023 was kind of the year back, because 2022 was very much a roller coaster ride for a lot of, nonprofit organizations and galas, because 2020 and 2021 were largely locked down. And 2022 was
Yeah.
kind of the year where everyone was kind of getting their sea legs back. You had
Mhm.
Omicron at the beginning of 2022, and a lot
Yeah.
of galas either got postponed or moved or canceled. And
Yeah.
it really kind of created this roller coaster ride effect. And with Make-A-Wish, they wound up having to cancel their gala in the winter, and they wound up doing one like in August of
Mhm.
2022. And then
Yeah.
they repeated doing one again in 2023 to get back onto kind of the cadence and the schedule
Yes.
that they want to be on. It was like, okay, people, when I went to that, I was like, okay, I think people are kind of back to where they want to be. The people who changed, whether it's a time of the year. And there were some organizations that did move from the spring to the fall, their
Yep.
signature fundraising gala, and vice versa. So it was really interesting to see that kind of play out, and for 2023 to really kind of be the happy year. And nothing screams fun, happy fashion like a derby party. So tell us a little bit about derby party themes and why you like that so much as a theme.
I love derby party themes because usually the weather's pretty good in May. Sometimes it can be on the warm side, but it's usually, nice spring weather. I think that women like to get dressed up in bright colors and bright prints and put on their hats or fascinators. I think that men like to don a seersucker sport coat or a very snazzy spring suit. There's the cocktails that create for lively conversation. You've got mint juleps, which is the signature cocktail of the Kentucky Derby. And you have people who are genuinely there for the cause. And oh, by the way, it happens to be a really fun theme, the Kentucky Derby.
Absolutely. So, what are some things you recommend if someone's putting on a party with a theme? And we'll stick with the derby party as an example. What are some things that are really critical to have like a successful, let's say, derby party event?
Gosh, there's so many elements that go into that. And I'm not a professional fundraiser or event planner, but I've been to enough of them where I can see what is done well and what isn't done well. I think a lot of times when you have like a signature cocktail like the Kentucky Derby party centers around the mint julep, you want to have lots of bars. And if you don't have lots of bars, you need to have, or I recommend you have bars with many bartenders at them, because no one wants to stand in line, especially if it's in the heat or it's untinted or whatever. So keeping the cocktails flowing, I think, is really important. And then keeping the action going. You want everyone's attention to turn to the screens for that minute and a half of the all crucial, all important derby run. So there's lots of things like that, that taking the event theme in mind is really, really crucial for any organization, any sort of event producer who creates it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the reasons that, a derby party works so well from an attendance perspective is one, they tend to be brief. Like most of the derby parties we were at, I mean, they were 2 to 3 hours max. They're
Mhm.
early in the evening. So if you have something else, we've gone to derby parties before and then gone home dressed in black tie and gone to something in black tie because it's early enough that you can do that. What I really appreciate also is that there's an interactive element to it. So, and the Bose, Hearts, Hats, and Horseshoes for Bose Place, it was at the Houston Polo Club, like you said, and it was one of those events, and they were on as a guest before, where it grew from an estate to the Polo Club. But you can go and you can look and you can see, on the monitor the derby going on, but off to the side you had the polo grounds, and you had, basically polo exhibitions going on with polo players on horseback that were, kind of simulating a polo match game. So it was really an interesting way to kind of make things fun and interactive and kind of tie it in and really allow kind of the theme in the event to shine.
That's really true. And I think that's a really good point that you make. You want to make an event shine. You want it to be memorable. I always am curious as to what attendees talk about on the car ride home after an event, what they liked, what they didn't like, who they talked to, who they didn't see. So it's really always fascinating. You want people to always leave with a positive point of view from an event, and also willing to want to be a part of it the following year.
Absolutely. And, while we're on the subject of kind of fun and happy and themed events, another event that I want to talk to you about is the Mad Hatter's Gala that was in Dallas in April. And it's a luncheon, so I shouldn't even call it a gala, but it's a luncheon. And it basically, they do theming in a way that it's probably the most innovative way that I think any event I've ever been to themes. So they basically have a series, and they were, a guest in a previous episode, but they have a bunch of hat categories, and people will go all out and they'll wear these hats that they get to be, judged on to win various prizes and really kind of get bragging rights, for the next year. And I know you've gone to it, quite a few times. So talk to us a little bit about, what makes that event special to you and why you enjoy it so much, and a little bit more about kind of the theming and the contest and all that.
Well, first of all, there's someone in the audience who's working on their hat for next year already.
That is true.
If you're attending this event, you come to play. What's wonderful is that it's a great cause. So you have Dallas Arboretum, which is a wonderful green space right in the middle of Dallas, Texas. And so you have this incredible, this incredible backdrop for what is an event that starts at 10 o'clock in the morning, goes until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it seems like. And then there are after party gatherings after that. So it's really fun that so many people want to support this great cause, want to go all out. I mean, you've got these head to toe outfits that, match the hats, as well as the hats being from head to toe sometimes. So I think people really, really get into that. And again, it's a great cause. So, hundreds and hundreds of people show up, a lot of men too, wearing hats and snappy spring suits. And, there's just a really, really good mojo that goes behind it. And it is really, that's a great example of an event that's evolved over time that I've seen, that I've attended over the past few decades. And I think it's at really its highest heights now. And I think that goes to the leadership of both the Dallas Arboretum as well as its, the booster group of supporters who create the event every year.
Absolutely. And what was so great about this year, so with the hat judging contest, so basically the theme this year was, it was British in honor of King Charles III's upcoming, then upcoming coronation. So it was held like a week or two before it. And, it's when people think of things with a contest, people typically think of, okay, there's like an area I go to get judged. And that's not how it works at that event. Basically, the judges will walk around, and if they see something that particularly interests them, they'll pull you aside and they will say, they'll go and they'll say, would you like to be judged in XYZ category? And you're allowed to decline. I was actually asked, and you were too, both of us came up people came up to us at different times asking if we wanted to be judged, and we both politely declined because we were there on duty and we wanted to make sure that we were, mingling with the guests. But it was really extremely flattering to, have someone walk up and think, "Oh, okay, you've got it going on at this," and in a highly, highly, highly competitive space. And the event to me it encapsulated what I said earlier about just the brightness and people wearing all these colors. And I know you and I were talking about this when we were, after the event, when we had gone, that there was this one person who came and she was in this simple black dress. And, I couldn't at the time figure out how that fit in with the overall theme. And then when they announced the winners, this person actually won because she was wearing the revenge dress, the black revenge dress, and basically copied, and emulated Princess Diana's outfit right after the divorce from King Charles. So it was kind of a really cheeky, fun way to kind of remind people of King Charles' history, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term.
That's right. And excuse me, you have an intersection of pop culture because there was a recent episode on The Crown that dealt with Princess Diana and that revenge dress and her outfit. So to carry that through to in real life, IRL as the kids call it these days, with a gala, I think it was really smart. And she won a category that, really spoke toward the theme, which was the coronation. So I think it all was a neat tie-in for each other.
And it also, what I most appreciated about it is you don't have to go over the top to win. That's what I loved
sure
about
help,
that.
Rob. If you go over the top, it sure does.
It sure does.
Go a long
but
way.
It was smart just because, it's, and especially if you've never gone to a gala before. And it's like, to me, it was the ultimate example of be yourself, because someone will notice you in a good way if you are yourself. And this person, and this woman went in something that worked for her. She felt comfortable in, she pulled it off with polish, and it's the reason that she won her category.
That's true. That's exactly right. What happened?
Absolutely. So we're going to go kind of from day in the luncheon to what has been going on with a lot of organizations and a lot of galas, and a lot of them have been doing musical performances. And there were quite a few musical highlights this spring. The first being, Garth Brooks at Mac Jack and McConaughey, which, and anyone who has ever been to the ACL Live Moody Theater, which is different than the big Moody Theater. This is the one inside the W Hotel. You have this small floor of about 450 that can, be seated at the gala. But then they open up and you can buy tickets, like $100 or $150 price point to listen to the musical performance. So like last year it was Kenny Chesney. This year it was Garth Brooks. So people get to see, and that's, if anyone is looking to listen to a musician in kind of a fun and unique way, I recommend going to a gala, especially because a lot of ticket prices for concerts with 25, 30,000 people at them are outrageous. You could actually probably buy a ticket to a gala, get fed, have cocktails all night, take your Uber home, and it would cost way less money than having to go to a hotel room and all that stuff. It gives you a much more exclusive and refined experience with a lot of top level musicians.
And oh, by the way, you're helping support a great cause.
Exactly. More than just yourself. Absolutely. And that's an excellent point. And what to make of that. And speaking of Kenny Chesney, he performed at a gala for the Texas Rangers Foundation. We also had someone that I know that you really like seeing perform. Tell us a little bit about the event in Holocaust Museum of Houston event.
Yeah, that was where Vanessa Williams performed, which was fantastic because Vanessa Williams can fill a stadium of 10 to 20,000 people. And it's so great that when she performed, she was on stage with her small band in a small backup singing group, and it really transformed the event. I don't think people realize what a dynamic performer she is in person like that. And so it was fun because even toward the end, after she sang all of her hits, of which there were many, people got up and started dancing by the stage, and she welcomed that. She really connected. I was one of the first people up there by the stage. She really connected with the audience members who were there to do a good deed, to support a great organization, and oh, by the way, also be entertained. And there's nothing wrong with being entertained at a gala. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I recommend it to everyone, instead of some galas who, every gala has a great heart. But if you're doing a live auction that takes up the entire gala, that's a tough dynamic when you could offer so much more.
Well, a gala is, it's a lot like life in a lot of ways. You're there, you've got to go through tough moments sometimes, and you're there because a cause is very important to you. And yes, you may shed a tear or two, but you've got to balance that with the light because, a gala also in part is highlighting how things can move forward or how things can be remembered or and
Yeah.
it allows people to put things in perspective. So
Mhm.
it's always important when anyone's going to a gala that you balance the heavy moments with some light ones, because the ultimate goal is you want them to come back next year. And if it's all heavy or all light,
Right.
they're either going to think this is I felt bad, I felt just dark for 2 days, or this is just really fluffy and frivolous. And you've got to be
Mhm.
able to kind of balance, be able to balance the two.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything fluffy or frivolous with a gala or an organization who wants to better the world with their fundraising arm, which is a gala.
Mhm.
So, a lot of people, I find that people who have not attended galas in the past are also the same kind of demographic who says, well, I'd never go to an opera. Well, I mean, how do you know if you've never attended an opera? So you got to try
Absolutely.
it. And, again, if the cause speaks to you, it matters. There's an energy in the room that it's sort of unspoken, but it's very, very palpable.
Absolutely. And when I say fluff, I basically mean that you've got to have stuff about the cause. And
Mhm.
it's a mix of tears and laughter, much like life is, and that's kind of why I say a gala can be a metaphor for life in those ways. Yes, it's okay to shed some tears, but it's also okay to laugh. And having a good balance of those two is really important.
Someone who balances that really well is the Zachary Scott Theater Organization in Austin. Whenever anyone buys a big ticket live auction item, they have, confetti, champagne bottles that open up, and music plays, and dancers come and dance around the table of the person who actually bought the item. That adds a fun element. I got to
It
tell you,
does.
that is really fun. And of course, that's a performing arts organization, so it makes sense that they would do that. And to me, it's just further branding. It's a great example of branding that organization even more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, while we're on the subject of performances, so one event, and this was at the very end of the social season, was was DIFA. And DIFA is a pretty grand, large scale
Go
event.
ahead, say it. It's off the chain.
It's off the chain.
DIFA, which
It,
is
it
Design Industry for Fighting AIDS, has been
yes.
around for 3 decades, and I've been to most of the events over the last 2.5 decades, and I am never ever surprised by how even more dazzling it gets every time I attend. Never surprised, because that is part of the fun. That is part of the fun and fundraising, to borrow the slogan of what your podcast is called. That's just part of why people attend.
Absolutely. And what's so amazing about that event is the fashion. And if there, I mean, it exceeds, I won't even say it rivals, it exceeds a lot of fashion shows that you would see at like a New York Fashion Week or a Paris Fashion Week or a Milan Fashion Week. It is that well done. So anyone who's looking for a good cause and wants to see some good fashion, that is an event that you must go to. I don't care where you live. Find a way to get a ticket and go. You will not be disappointed because it is what, a 50-yard long runway. And I mean, you can talk to it, please share some more about it.
Yeah, it's half the length of a football field. So unless you have ever walked down a run walk, a catwalk that long in public, I can tell you it is a long, long way to walk. It's sort of a sensory overload. I was so fortunate to have been named a style setter in the 20 teens, and thrilled to have helped the organization as much as I have over the prior decades, and to be honored as a style setter and to walk down that runway for such a long time. It's really hard to put it into words how special it is, because you have thousands and thousands of people in the same venue, hooting and hollering and cheering, and the fun never stops. Then there's the after party, but the fashion it's what, 90 minutes of fashion, so it's nonstop. So it's really, really a fun endeavor. And I agree, anyone who wants to support a great cause and attend an off-the-chain event, DIFA is a great choice for that.
Absolutely. And and for anyone who is familiar with Dallas, it's at the Hilton Anatole usually. And I'll never forget, and I've gone to it several times, and this time I just noticed something I never noticed before. But when I was walking out one of the doors, it had the room capacity, and the room capacity is over 10,000 people. So people are like, there is no way that you can do a 50-yard. Well, yes, there is. You have to see this room to kind of believe it. But yes, it holds that many people. And there are hockey and basketball arenas that are roughly that size, or maybe a little larger than that. So
Yeah.
it really is something and a feat to behold.
Yeah, it's a very special event, and it's near and dear to a lot of people in Dallas and the North Texas area because it benefits AIDS and AIDS tied organizations in the North Texas area exclusively. So the money stays in this state.
Absolutely. So, we're running a little short on time here, but before we go, I want you to talk a little bit about why you think so many galas are still doing record fundraising numbers, even though the stock market is a little bit off of its peak highs, because the numbers in 2021 was like, some of this won't happen again. And, for some organizations, yes, it may have been a blooper, but it may be a little lower, but it's still way above like what it was in 2019. Why do you think there is still so much record-breaking fundraising happening at so many organizations?
I think that all goes back to what the ethos of Texas and Texans is really about. I've talked ad nauseum over the years about the largesse of Texans. That's really reflected in the organizations that is benefited by these people who give back. I think there was pent-up demand during the pandemic. People couldn't travel, so they gave, and there were a lot of virtual galas, as you well recall. And hopefully that's all in the past. Hopefully, everything will remain live and in person and more optimistic. But I really credit the organizations as well as continuing to attract these patrons and attract these attendees and giving the guests something different to look forward to as they attend it.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great way to, great note and a great way to end on is there is a lot of generosity out there. And by making your signature fundraising event stand out, you can really help transform your organization, which therefore helps transform your community in a really positive way.
That's exactly right.
Lance, thank you. Oh,
go ahead. Go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
Oh.
Well, thank you so much for having me as a guest. Your Fun and Fundraising podcast is a big hit. You've had so many great guests so far, and I'm excited to see how it continues to move forward. And thank you again for having me on these couple of episodes.
Absolutely. And tell us how people can find you.
Absolutely. CuratedTexan.com, SocietyTexas.com, and the new TexasLuxuryConsultants.com, where I am helping brands from beyond Texas get to know Texans and what our state is about so they can have a bigger and more dynamic presence here.
Well, there is nobody who is more equipped to know and understand the Texas luxury market than Lance Avery Morgan. So again, Lance, thank you so much for having us. And, we're excited to have you on as a guest again, if you would like to be.
Thank you so much. It would be an honor. Keep up the great work, Rob.
Thank you so much. And that will do it with this special 2-part episode of Fun and Fundraising. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, reminding you to keep it fun, keep it interesting, and your guests will have a great time. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.